Hey guys, Loot Wizard here with another video on Gems of War, and this is another week where we have new troops in the Soulforge, and we're going to be going over which ones I think are worth getting or trying to get, and which ones aren't. So starting with the blue summoning stones here, let's take a look at these, and yeah, there really isn't anything in here that I would recommend getting. Unless, of course, you need this for the raid boss event. I mean, they do more damage based on their ascension, so I already have this one at Mythic. But if you don't have it at Mythic, then you might want to try getting some of these if you can spare the blue summoning stones. But there are better cards that you can wait for, especially early game. For green, I would say Sea Troll is probably the best one out of this bunch. Sea Troll, if you don't already have it, is really great for mana generation. It doubles the number of blue on the board, then it creates 3 blue gems. So if you have like 10 blue gems already on the board, it'll double that to 20, and then it adds 3, so it'll create, or it'll have a total of 23 on the board. It has a 12 mana cost, but that can be cut in half if you use the Titan class and you trade it, because it creates the ability for giant troops to start with 50% mana. So this can start with 6%, or 6 mana rather. So yeah, Sea Troll is probably the best one here out of that. Moving on to red. And for red, I would say we're in the same situation as green with another event troop here. This one is for the tower events instead of the raid boss events. So, but this is very specific to the type of troops used. So, again, this is something you want to try to get probably later game. If you're still lower level, I would say skip trying to get any troops in this one. Yellow. I would say early game you got 2 troops here that are actually pretty good. In yellow, you have the Ranger, which is a really good troop early on. Later game, you just completely stop using this, really, because they're just much stronger troops. But early game, I use this troop a lot. It does damage to an enemy, and then it deals 8 damage randomly split among enemies, boosted by enemies alive. So it does do a pretty good amount of damage for a low mana cost in early game. The other one is Goblin Rocket, which is a pretty good troop early on. It explodes a gem, then it deals light splash damage to a random enemy, then it gains an extra turn. And that extra turn can be pretty useful. It does have Firelink, which allows it to gain a bonus to red mana, and it uses red mana, so... but yeah, Goblin Rocket is still useful even a little bit later game in some teams. So yeah, those are the 2 there I would say are worth trying to get if you don't have them. Purple. So in purple, I would say the best one out of the bunch here is probably Clockwork Sphinx. Now, you might already have this one early game, but if you don't, it's pretty good because it destroys all gems of a chosen color. And then it gives all allies armor boosted by the magic you currently have, and boosted by gems destroyed. So, yeah, that's really good to be able to choose a mana color and then destroy all those gems. And if you don't know what destroying is, destroying gems basically removes the gem from the board with its full effect as if they were matched. And it does have a 12 mana cost, but again, that can be cut in half if you use the mech class, and if the mech class is traded. That allows all mech troops to start with half mana. Now, this troop I still do use even end game in some teams, especially with the mythic troop Tina 9000. And so, yeah, I would recommend this is a good troop early game and even in late game. If you don't have it already, I would say it's worth getting that this week. Finally, for brown, we don't really have anything really fantastic in here, except I would say No Ben Brothers, if you don't have it, is really good for goblin teams. So that is something that is probably worth getting. Diviner is pretty good for a few things. but it's not game breaking. You can definitely create a lot of early game teams without Diviner. And No Bend Brothers, like I said, really doesn't work really great unless you have a full Goblin team. So you need 2 or 3 other Goblin troops um, in order to make it really work well together. But yeah, No Bend Brothers probably the card I would say is worth getting in here. I mean, Desert Troll. Actually, looking at this actually does have a few troops that are somewhat useful. Desert Troll is like the other Sea Troll that I mentioned in the other color day, except this one doubles the number of yellow on the board, then it creates 3 yellow gems. So, yeah, actually there's a couple of troops worth trying to get in here if you don't have them, and that being Desert Troll and No Bend Brothers would be the 2 that I would say are worth trying to get if you don't already have them. But again, those 2 aren't completely game breaking. So it's up to you and how many summoning stones you're willing to part with to try to get them, because it is a little bit of a gamble for those. Alright, now moving on to the legendary troops in the Forge this week. We have Karnax, we have Jarl Fire Mantle, we have Celestasia, and Queen Mab. Now, out of these 4, I would say the best one, if you're going to try to get a legendary out of these, probably Queen Mab, I would say, out of these 4, I found the most use for. Although Jarl Firemantle and Karnax have also have their uses. I would say, though, the 2 best ones out of the 4 are probably Queen Mab and Firemantle. But Queen Mab, in my opinion, is a little better. But these legendary troops can be acquired eventually in game by just using glory keys and some gem keys and so those guild seal keys that you get. So I don't think any of these 4 legendaries is really worth the 800 diamond cost. But if you really want to get one, Queen Mab's probably the one to get out of there. Now, moving on to the mythic troops here. We have Plague, Famine, Yasemin's Chosen, and Suna. Now, out of these 4, I am partial to Suna. Simply because Suna has won quite a few battles for me in Guild Wars and some PvP matches. What Suna does is steal life from the 2 weakest enemies and steal 8 magic from the 2 strongest enemies. So basically it's stealing something from every troop on the enemy team. It steals 8 magic from the 2 strongest, and it steals life from the 2 weakest. Now, when it steals that life, it's going to add that life to its own, so it also becomes a little tanky because of it's gaining more life every time it gets cast. The other really great thing about it, if it's fully traded, is the Sunfire trait, which Fairy Fires random enemies when matching red gems. Now, what Fairy Fire does is it allows spells to do 50% extra damage to an enemy that is currently Fairy Fired. So, and since it takes red mana, you're probably going to be, matching red gems just to fill it anyway. And so, instead of taking 22 life from the 2 weakest enemies, that will get boosted by 50%. And so it'll take 32 life from 2 enemies if those 2 enemies are Fairy Fired. So that, and also spells from other troops will get the 50% spell boost in damage as well. It has a lower mana cost as a mythic, which is kind of nice. A lot of mythics have 22, 24, 26 mana costs. Suna only has 20 mana cost with a color of red, green, and purple. So it's also to note here is that it is a divine troop, and you can, with the legendary troop Divine Ishbala, you will be able to have divine troops start at 40% mana, so you can actually cut this 20 almost in half if you combine those 2 troops together. So Suna is pretty good. I'm very partial to Suna. Yasmin's Chosen, I just don't use quite as often. Um, it does damage randomly split amongst enemies. It boosted by the entangled enemies. It creates 10 green gems. And it entangles a random enemy when matching green. So what entangle does is it brings their attack damage down to 0 as long as they're entangled. So this effect really only works to your benefit when it's on the first troop. So as you can see here, it entangles a random enemy when matching green. This troop would be way better as a mythic troop if it wasn't random. If it said entangles the first enemy when matching green, this troop would be way better. The fact that it's random makes it worse, and I don't know why they did that. As a mythic troop, you would think that it would be as powerful as it could be. And it wouldn't be game breaking either, in my opinion, to have that instead of random be the first, because there's other troops, like there's a legendary dragon troop that when you match a certain color that it entangles the first enemy. So you have a legendary troop that does that, but we have a mythic troop that's all about entangling, and it does random entangling. So I don't understand why that is that way. And I just don't use this troop that often because of that, and it doesn't do quite that as much damage as you would think it should do as a legendary troop or as a mythic troop. So other than the mana generation of creating 10 green gems and its lower mana cost, it really is not a fantastic mythic troop. It's better than some mythics, but I just don't use it as often. I definitely use Suna more than Yasmin's Chosen. And the same goes for Famine and Plague. Famine, it drains mana from all enemies, so it's really more of a controlling mythic troop here. First enemy loses 3 skill points at the start of each turn, so it's more of a controlling mythic troop. If you really want to be that annoying person that sets this in your defense, it definitely will annoy people for sure. But other than that, it's not like a mythic that I think is really something that's gonna. I just think Suna is better. It has better synergy with other mythic troops as well. Plague decreases random skill on all enemies by 3 every time it's cast, but it has a 22 mana cost. So how many times in a match are you gonna cast this in order to do that? Yeah, poison and disease them. I really don't think Plague is quite as good either. In my opinion, and some people may disagree with me, but in my opinion, I think Suna is the one to get out of these 4. But one thing that I'll say here is if you don't have Infernus, if you don't have Megavore, and Pharaoh's Ra, a couple of those other mythics that are way better, then don't get any of these this week. Save your diamonds, and your first few mythics, you want them to be things like Infernus, Pharaoh's Ra for your souls, and troops like Megavore that are top tier. So, all right, guys, that about wraps up this week on the troops in the Soulforge and my opinions on them. So thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.